Lucy Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr Stringer. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and can I congratulate and thank my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle North, in bringing this debate and in the excellent opening speech that she gave, and I fully support her comments about remote participation in Westminster Hall. I also want to thank the instigators of the petition and the 200,000 plus people who've signed it. It's an impressive number, but it's unsurprising given that hospitality is, I think, the hardest hit sector, as well as its associated activities such as weddings, events, live entertainments and so on. I think at the heart of this petition, people are looking for leadership. That's why they want a specific minister. They want leadership, they want focus, they want understanding. And no disrespect to the minister, for whom I share a lot of these occasions with, but what we've had is bits. Piecemeal, sticking plaster support offers alongside restrictions which have been stop-start and sometimes feel particularly pernicious on the sector and often lacking in evidence. And I think this petition reflects the idea that the government just isn't getting hospitality in all its forms. As we've heard, hospitality covers lots of different businesses, but at the heart of it are people who've put their life's work, their livelihoods and their love into creating businesses that bring people together, and often their own personal assets in guaranteeing them. We've heard it's a huge part of our economy, the third biggest employer pre-COVID, generating billions in turnover and tax. These businesses make up the heart and soul of our town centres, city centres, high streets and our communities. And they're a key part of the ecosystem. And they bring people and places together. And we saw that recently in the BBC documentary that Tom Kerridge, one of the supporters of this petition, presented. An excellent programme. And there's a wider ecosystem too, from the supply chain that we've heard about, the nighttime economy, like taxi driver security, as well as hotels, events, weddings. It's a huge and interlinked, diverse sector, and it employs many young people and those from BME background and women. And it was growing before, and it will be growing again. We welcome the support the hospitality sector had at the start of the pandemic. It was the right thing to do then, and it's right now that that support continues. But then, cash grant support was worth more, and the other packages and packages that were brought in at the time were designed for a much shorter period of time. Loans, deferrals, moratoriums, etc. They're now not fit for the same purpose of nearly a year and growing of closures and lost trade. This is the key issue, which I think other members have raised as well. What was designed for 3 months initially now just isn't appropriate for the 12 to 18 months that we're talking about. It's economically the right thing to do. The government said that they would put their arm around the shoulder of the sector, but that must be maintained. Every business that goes bust that was previously viable will lengthen and deepen the long tail of recovery. And that's not just a Labour view, that is the view of the IMF, the Bank of England, the OECD. You can't cut your way out of a crisis. And lots of focus early on was rightly on the furlough scheme to protect jobs. But as leading businesses now warn, without further support for businesses, those jobs will no longer be able to be furloughed as businesses go bust. There's a survey out today saying that 250,000 businesses, many of them hospitality and associated, will fold this year. So this is a devastating warning. But it's morally the right thing to do to support businesses as well, because they've closed to keep us safe, and it's only right that the government should step in to support them to keep them going. So with light at the end of the tunnel, it's even more important now that there's a proper long-term plan to help businesses survive to that point and then thrive beyond. But I'm sorry to say that despite some of the early actions taken, no such plan is forthcoming. We have the sticking plaster approach to economic support and no plan or route map to reopening. And contrast this with other countries like Germany and elsewhere. Speak to any business and they'll tell you that cash flow is the major issue now. Action simply cannot wait until the budget. Many businesses will be bust by then. Furlough extension is welcome, but contributions are now stretching balance sheets. They've taken the loans, they've taken the deferrals, the holidays, they've not paid the rent, yet still it's not enough. And the stop-start nature of the lockdowns has damaged business confidence and liquidity, as we've heard about the costs of restocking and losing stock along the way. Businesses were expecting the job retention bonus, but they had it taken away at the last minute despite it being priced in. And that was all before the hospitality lost their golden months of the pre-Christmas trade. So it's no surprise to see some of the latest business surveys showing that more than half hospitality businesses have less than 3 months of cash reserves. Only 1 in 5 hospitality businesses have enough to survive until March. And just this week, we've heard of Mitchells and Butlers seeking to refinance, one of the oldest and biggest players in the sector, losing £40 million a month just to stay closed. So I don't like to say it, but it does feel like ministers are a little bit asleep at the wheel on this. I'm sure the minister will tell us about the billions of pounds that's been spent, but unless they set out a long-term plan and a comprehensive framework for businesses to see them through to the spring, we'll see waves of insolvencies and job losses. Begging the question, as somebody asked earlier, about the billions that's already been spent to this date. What was it for if at the critical juncture the rug is pulled and jobs and businesses are lost anyway? We've got to be also honest about the announcements that have been made this week. The £9,000 isn't available to most businesses. 5 out of 6 will get a lot less than that. And even when you take this together with the local restrictions grants, it's still a lot less than it was received last time around. And it doesn't even cover the supply chain, who are again waiting to see if discretionary grants will come to them. Many of them it won't. And what about the medium-sized businesses, the hotels, the chains, the breweries and others? £9,000 is frankly a drop in the beer glass, as somebody said earlier, and no mention of the excluded, many associated with this sector indeed. What was an outrage for 3 months for these people is now economically and mentally fatal for many after nearly 12 months. We called on the government to begin by using the £2 billion repaid by supermarkets to provide proper support to businesses and the excluded, but they've yet to do so. And I'm afraid what is coming now is a huge amount of business uncertainty ahead, and the government urgently needs to get ahead of this and make sure there is this comprehensive plan. Because what is now coming ahead of us is one massive surge of cash flow crisis and businesses going bust. Just in the next few months, we're going to see the end of the evictions ban, the end of the business rates holiday, the end of the government-backed loans, corporation tax payments due, end to the VAT cut, end to the VAT deferrals, end to measures to prevent insolvencies. Yet businesses will need to start repaying their VAT deferrals and business rates in April. Yet we hear this weekend that hospitality businesses won't even be reopened by then. This is now urgent. Businesses looking ahead at their cash flow are taking decisions today on their staff and their future of their businesses. This cannot wait until March. Something must be done. The VAT reduction will have had little benefit for most businesses because they've been closed during that time. So I'm afraid the failure of the government to set out what might happen to these deadlines is creating massive anxiety and will lead to wave after wave of insolvency and consequential job losses. Not only extending and deepening the economic crisis, but taking with them all the loans and the previous investment and keeping them going up to this point. It makes no economic sense whatsoever. And alongside this economic spring plan for businesses, we need a real clear route map to reopening, as the British Beer and Pub Association, UK Hospitality and others are calling for. They want proper discussion now about the route map to reopening. What levels of vaccinations, hospitalisations and mortality is needed for reopening, and what does that reopening look like? No household mixing, substantial meals again, curfews again. These have all caused extra burden when the evidence is clear. So, in conclusion, the hospitality businesses and their associated ecosystem, they need better leadership, focus and understanding. They need cash support that matches business need and revenue loss. There will be no businesses for firms and to employ people unless this is done. They need immediate action on the uncertainty created around these cliff edges. And this may involve big creative thinking on some of the big issues coming up the track, with rent deferrals and the huge debt overhang, which will need to be addressed at some point. The government needs to stop their scattergun approach leading to sticking plaster solutions and come up with a proper long-term plan for this hugely important sector in distress.